Hello, everyone. It's Comfort Beach Ambesh, and welcome to uh, the episode of PHP, where we're going to learn about uh, PHP PHP variables, and the basic PHP data types. Yeah, so I had to switch my code editor. I realized I realized that Sublime Text was giving me some issues. It was crashing every after a few minutes. So I've decided to go with Visual Studio Code. If you're interested to go with Visual Studio Code as well for writing your PHP codes, the link is already in the description. You can download it right there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drag and drop this PHP tuts folder onto my Visual Studio Code so that things become easier. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drag and drop it as I've said it. Okay, so I'm going to drag and drop it here. Okay, boom, and it's here. So this is this is the left navigation panel of VS Code, which shows the files that we are working with. Yeah, so it has options like here. This is the title of the folder or the name of the folder. Here this is where we create files from. Here this is where we create the folders from. Here this is where we refresh from, and this is where we do the expanding. This is where we do the collapsing of folders, like expanding them so that you could see the sub files and folders. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new file which I'm going to name episode episode 3 dot, never forget the extension, episode 3 dot php. So here I'm going to start my PHP code as as we learned in the previous episode on the syntax, to say PHP codes always starts like this and ends like this. Okay, so let's make use of the comment. So I'm going to say variable declaration. So this is just a comment to guide us through of what you're trying to achieve here. Variable declaration. So before we could talk about variables, let's get to understand what a variable really is. So a variable is a named memory space which is assigned onto a computer, or a variable is a named memory space which is stored onto a computer. So this memory space is more of a storage which holds some things or some values, to be specific, and it can be it can be accessed anytime you want in your program, to be specific. So let's take it for instance as a container which holds like let's take it for instance like containers that hold specific items. Let's take it for instance that the first con we have three containers. The first containers holds a collection of names. The second container holds the answers to 1 plus 1. And let's take it, for instance, the third holds the what's this the name of the Facebook CEO. Yeah, so we have these three containers. So these three containers that we have, we can access them anytime we want. Let's say if we want to access the name of the Facebook CEO in container number 3, so what you have to do first is to make it known onto a computer to say, okay, the CEO of Facebook is Mark Zuckerberg. So my computer store this information for me to say, okay, the CEO Mark Zuckerberg. We give it a name to say, okay, Meta CEO. Yeah, it is stored somewhere for future reference. Let's also, if we want to store like the answer to 1 plus 1, we tell our computer to say, okay, store this information for 1 plus 1 of what 1 plus 1 evaluates to, and third, yes, let's something like that. That's how a variable operates. That's how I could describe variables in the simplest terms. Okay, so let's say now let's come to the actual code now, since talking is cheap. Yeah, so let's go. So a variable in PHP is declared using a variable, a dollar sign. So just like this, like for instance, if you want to store a name onto a computer, you could just say name is equals to comfort, comfort ambesh, comfort beach ambesh to be precisely, comfort beach ambesh. So now this is our variable now. This is our variable and it has a name and it is assigned to comfort beach ambesh. So take note of this formula which I will write here. Like this is the formula we use in PHP to create a variable or to declare a variable. Variable name, then what it is assigned to, and then here a value to be specific. Yeah, so so this is the formula that we'll be using: variable name, and then what it is assigned to. What we mean by what is it is assigned to is the value that it holds, or the data that is stored onto a variable. Okay, so now for instance, we have this variable with the name of name, which is assigned to comfort beach and base. So this equal to sign here, for now we are not going to be calling it equal to sign. As a programmer, since we have started this journey, it will be an assignment operator. Yeah, so it is what you are going to be using to assign stuff onto variables. So this is how we declare variables. So in programming, we need to be specific, like what type of data are we supposed to hold, or to be specific, what type of data is the variable supposed to hold or store. So we need to be specific in programming. In programming, we don't have to just say like we declare a variable, we want it to store a number. So we want to store a digit. We need to be specific, like for just like that. We need to tell our computer to say we are storing a number. Or if we want to store a name, we need to tell our computer to say, okay, we are trying to store something with a combination of letters. That's a word. Yeah, a word is a combination of letters, if I'm not mistaken. But of course it is. Yeah, we need to be specific. We need to tell our computer what exactly we are dealing with. So now, that type of data that we are dealing with, or the type of information, it is what is called data types in programming. Data types in programming. So, uh, like I said, a data type is a type of data that is stored by a variable, to be precisely. Yeah, that the type of data. So now, the basic data types that we deal with in PHP are, let me write write them down here. Let's delete this formula. Hope you have mastered it or copied it somewhere. Okay, so the first data type is string. I'm going to explain them later. Integer, uh, a float. Fourth, we have array, and fifth, we have function. So, and the last one, we have boolean. So now these are the basic data types that we deal with in PHP. So let's talk about a string. What's a string? A string is a combination of characters. When I say a character in programming, a character is a letter. So for now, we are not going to be using letters. We're just going to be using characters to to represent the letters. So we'll be going with characters rather than letters. When we use letters, it sounds so general. to be honest with me. Yeah, it sounds so general, and that shows like a lack of professionalism in the programming world. So let's go. So a string is a combination of characters. What we mean here is we can, okay, a combination of characters can be names like Comfort Sambesh. Comfort Sambesh is a combination of characters. Why? Because we have multiple letters here. We have multiple letters here from COMFR to CHAMBA. Even spaces, even the spaces are also taken as characters in programming. So now this combination, the whole combination makes a string, but a single character like C is only a character, just like the way it is. This is a character. Single letters like this are characters. But for now, uh, when it becomes like this, now this is a combination of characters or any name or anything. Like if we say comfort, or even the way we type in those emails to say comfort Chambesh 4 at email.com, comfort Chambesh 4 at email.com. This this is a character in programming. Why? Because it's a combination. Sorry, this is a string. Sorry, people. Of yeah, it's not. This is not a character, but this is a string. So in programming, this is a string because it contains a combination of characters. Let's go to integers now. Let's go to integers. So integers, these are numerical values. These are numerical values. So what we mean by numerical values, what okay, so what we mean by the numerical values are the values, the integral numbers from negative to positive, the non-decimal values to be precisely. Okay, so let's start by the string. So now, upon learning how we do declare variables in PHP, let's now start talking about the data types. Now, the type of data that we'll be storing onto the data types, those memory spaces that are stored onto a computer. So now, let's say string. Okay, for a string, let's say once as a string, like I have said, we store a combination of characters, a combination of characters can be special characters, general letters, the alphabetical letters, or anything else, as long as they are in either double quotes or single quotes. Yeah, so that can be achieved by, let's say, uh okay, mostly when we are dealing with variables, they are like properties of a certain object or event. So let's say I want to describe uh, uh, a certain individual by the name of Tzenge's Valley. He's of age 21. Uh, he's of age 21, and the height is like 6 inches. Like no, six, not 6 inches. Like let's say 6 meters. Yeah, 6 meters. So we need to state the properties of that individual. So the first name is the first name is uh, Tizenge. Tizenge. The last name. So here it doesn't matter if you want. You can use a single quotes like this or double quotes. But as for me, with my coding style, I like using double quotes for strings since I have a C++ coding background. Yeah, but with you can pick any. So last name last name is equals to Sibali. Sibali. So this is how we deal with the string data types. They just store the combination of characters. Like let's say if we want to store his email, we could just say uh, uh, Zenge Sibale at if it's at gmail.com. This I'm pretty sure that this email doesn't exist. I've just guessed it out. Okay, so email is equals to zenge at gmail.com. So this is a string. This is how we can make use of a string in coding. And one thing that you don't have to forget when you are writing codes is the termination. When we put in this, it means okay, our string code is ending from here. So this is the use of the semicolons here. The semicolons are used to terminate our code. So whenever you finish writing up your codes, your PHP codes, please make sure that you terminate with a semicolon. So let's go to integer. So like I've said, an integer, these are numerical values that are stored onto a computer. Yeah, that are stored onto a computer. So these numerical values could either be negative values or positive numbers, but they just don't have to be in decimal form. Take note of that. Let me repeat myself again. Integer data types are numerical values that could either be in negative or positive form, but never in decimal form. Only negative or positive. Boom. Let's go. Okay. When do we use the integer in coding? So we use, okay, so for now, what we're trying to do here is uh, Zenge properties. We're trying to uh, we are trying to uh, find the properties of this. We are trying to bring up the properties of this individual by the name of Zenge Sibade. So as a person, he's a person. So people are defined as objects in programming. So I just this individual, of course, an individual has a name, of which, if we have a look at the name, it's a combination of characters. That's a string. Email, that's a string. So now, what of his age and the date of birth? Yeah. So let's go. The age. So age cannot be written in strings unless otherwise, or unless you feel so. Okay. Let's say age, we declare the same way, a dollar sign, the name of the variable, age, the assignment operator, what you want to assign it to. So when we're dealing with integers, we never put in any quotes. So we just have to write the number or the figure directly. So let's say 21, and then we terminate with a semicolon. So which means our code is starting from here up to where the semicolon is. That's how we write codes. So now this is it. It has made sense. Even it has even fulfilled our definition of an integer here, So this is how we use the integers. Like yeah. So let's go to floating point. Maybe okay, float. Okay, a float, a float a float also holds some figures, but the only difference between an integer and a float or a floating point data type is that integer data types do not store any figures or numbers in decimal form. But the floating point, on the other hand, to be specific, the floating point data type store figures in decimal form. Floating point figures, and if a value, if a number doesn't have any decimal point or any decimal value, just know that that is not a floating point. Instead, it's an integer. Okay, so enough of that. Let's say now, how do we use the floating point on this scenario? So as a programmer, you need to be thinking critically. The names that you give to the variables must be meaningful. Instead of why okay, let's say here on age, if you want to define the age, how come, let's say if you want here, let's say giving it a name to say full 21, and then how are you going to know next time, like after 3 months, when you come to check through your code to say, okay, I was talking about the age here. So your name, your variable names must be meaningful. Okay. Okay, let's go to the floating point. Let's say now we want to, on this scenario, we're talking about the properties of the of Dzenge. This is a human. So we're going to say account balance. Please take a note that variable names must not contain any spaces. Variable names never contain any spaces. If you write the variable name like this is wrong. Why? Because you have added a space here. Always make sure that there are no spaces left. Okay, so account balance is equals to. Okay, so this is also a figure, so it doesn't have to be in quotes. So let's say he has 10 10,000 10,000 point 50 ngwe or US dollars or pounds, whichever, and then we terminate from here. So now we have declared our variable of type float here. Okay, we go to the next step. Let's see our hierarchy array. Okay, so I would like to talk about the arrays and functions at last. Let's go to boolean. Okay, so a boolean data type. Boolean data type. A boolean data type. A boolean data type only store uh Boolean variables only store true or false. Only true or false. Only these two, true or false. Now, why? Okay, these are just like the conditions they do. Okay, sorry, excuse. Like the conditions. Let's say in a scenario where you're trying to log in onto your Facebook account, and then let's say you have entered invalid credentials. If you have entered invalid credentials, and then what it will evaluate to will be false. When you enter the correct credentials, that is the correct email, phone, or and the what's this uh and the password, which is going to evaluate to true. So same thing applies to the boolean. So it's same thing applies to the boolean. Booleans only evaluate to true or false. So yeah, so when, like, for instance, let's take it for instance, want to see, is this Zenge guy a male or female? Let's say we could just simply say is male is equals to, is this line a male? True. Yeah, it's true. Is Zenge male? Sure. Yes, it's true. If we say is male, then we're going to say true. Why? Because Zenge is a male. If we say here to is female, say female. Yeah, it's female, so it has to be true. Yeah, because sorry, it's false. So if we say is female is equals to false. Why? Because Zenge is not a female, instead is male here. So if we say is female is equals to false, it means this guy with all of these properties you have previously played around with is a male, of which the only variable which is evaluating to true is male. So take note of the boolean. Boolean, when it's 1, it means true. When it's 0, it means false. So take note of that. That's a very important point to take note of. So when it's true by default, uh, this this is equivalent to 1, and then this is equivalent to, the other one is equivalent to 0. Yeah, so is female, so this one is equivalent to 0. False is equivalent to 0, and true is equivalent to 1. So this is how we deal with the booleans when we are coding, or when you're writing code. So uh, let's talk about the basic introduction of something called arrays. Arrays, let me create a separate space for arrays. Okay. Yeah, sounds sounds so confusing if I begin coding, but it's not as confusing as you may think. Okay, so array. What is an array? An array is a collection of elements of values. arrays in PHP are the collection of values or elements. What do we mean elements? Elements we simply mean just uh, the values. Yeah, the values, the elements. Let's take it for instance. Why do we use arrays rather than the traditional data types? Let's say in a scenario where you want to list down the names of people, the names of people. Let's say we have John, Tzenge, Comfort, Ephraim, Elijah, Niza, Glanos, Philip, and Philip. If we had to write them down, we could say name one, name one, name one is equals to Zenge, uh, uh, name two is equals to Sivale. Sorry, yeah, Sivale, and name name three. Okay, I like to use this name three is equals to comfort. So you see, what if we could just declare a single so here if we have a look at this, we have three variables with three values. What if we could just declare a single variable and we put all of these in a single variable rather than writing each and each? So here, if we have 1000 names, which means we're going to write down uh, 1000 variables, of which is not okay. So that's where the arrays come in. So all of these can be written in a single in a single variable. Yeah, we could just simply say okay, same format of declaring a variable here, name, and then equal to. We just use square brackets here. We we start adding. Okay, take note of this. Take note of this. If we're dealing with strings, we just have to put in quotes or a single or double quotes or single quotes. I'm going to go with double. So let's say zenge, 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 uh, sivale, the edge. Since the edge is an integer, and as we have stated here to say we have integers are never stored in double quotes. So what are we going to do? We're just going to say comma. Okay, array values are separated by commas. So if you want to add another value, you need to add a comma. So since age is not an integer or any sorry oh sorry, since age is not a string or any other type, since age is only an integer and not a float or any other integer, oh sorry, or not any other data type apart from an integer. So we are going to say 21 as the age. Yep. And uh, is male. Yeah, true. So this is how we deal with the array. So an array is the collection of elements. What we mean by the collection? So this is the first element, second element, okay, second element, third, and the fourth element. So now this is a collection. All of this is a collection. The collection is enclosed in between the square brackets. So this is what we mean when we say an array in PHP. So now let's go to functions. Function. Okay, so what is a function? A function is a block of codes that perform a specific rule or a set of instructions that achieve a certain goal. Yeah. So what we mean when we say that is okay, what functions really are in PHP or in any programming language is a function. Take note of this. A function can never run until it is called. Okay, so now how do we declare a function in PHP? Okay, so it is the functions are declared like this. We use the keyword function, Okay, so like I said, like we have stated, a function is a block of codes that perform a specific task. So what if that task is to calculate the account balance of this individual design? Or maybe the task of this code is to calculate the age. Or maybe let's just say is to just to give us the balance, the account balance. So we're going to name it show balance, and then uh, brackets here, and then uh, okay, the blocks. Okay, so here what? So our code. So what? Here's the formula of declaring the function. For now, functions and arrays cannot may not sound may sound a little bit of indirect for now, but as the time goes on, you guys are going to have a clear understanding about them. I've organized the videos. I organize the videos in future that you only be specific about arrays and functions. Okay, so here's the formula. We say the keyword function, then function name, then brackets, okay, and then these the parentheses, and then your code here. Yeah, so this is the formula. I'm going to copy paste it here. So your code here. So let's say this is showing is called show balance, show balance. So your code here. So let's say if we are going to use the echo. Remember the echo, which we learned about during the basic syntax of PHP. We're going to say uh, the balance is uh, 10, 10, 10,000 point 15 Zambian kwacha. Yeah, so this is how we deal with the functions. So functions and the arrays, like I've said, may sound a little bit of unclear for now to some of you guys, but don't don't worry about that. There are some videos in future that will only be specific about functions and arrays, so that they can mark a clear understanding of uh, arrays and functions. That's all I had for this tutorial, guys. And don't forget to invite your friends, share these tutorials so that you could reach out to many people who are interested in these free lessons. And see you in the next episode, guys. Cheers.